Hello everybody, hope you had a really nice morning. Right now we're going to have a talk which is Can Matrix can be easy and secure by Andy. For people looking online, please ask your question in the chat. And please welcome Andy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, today I'm going to be talking about the Invisible Crypto Initiative, which is a plan or a vision to make the fact that your messages are encrypted kind of unnoticeable to you when you're using Matrix. Someone did ask me earlier, am I going to answer the question, can Matrix be both secure and easy to use? And spoiler, yes. The answer is yes. But also there's kind of a dependency within that question. So you can't leave yet. You need to wait and see how it turns out. So I'm Andy. I'm a member of the crypto team at Element. If you're wondering who we are, if you remember those things called unable to decrypt, things that used to happen to you and don't happen anymore? Yes. Yeah? We fixed it. That's what I'm claiming anyway. Okay, just to say, all of the work that we're doing on this and we've done on this is part of our work for Element. It's all 100% free and open source software, and much of it is directly donated to the Matrix Foundation. So if you're an Element customer, you've helped. Okay, here's how the talk's going to go. We're going to briefly talk about what the vision is, which I've already kind of half described. Then I'm going to talk about how, so far, what we've done is make everything worse than it was before. And I'm hopefully going to convince you about why we needed to do that. And then I'm going to talk about how what we're going to do next is make everything better. So we'll go through the different parts of that. And then at the end, I'm going to make a very important announcement that in no way have you already heard twice this week. So stick around to hear what that is. Okay, so here is my visualization of where we've got to in the Invisible Crypto journey. The scale on the left is how visible encryption is in Matrix. And so far, as I said, we've made everything worse. We're right at the top of the hill and we're about to start rolling down the hill and everything's going to get better. You don't need to read all the labels here. We'll go through these things as we go. So you should be filled with a sense of optimism and potential. Okay, so what is the vision? What do we want encryption or using encrypted messaging in Matrix to feel like? Well, it should be safe for you and private. And you should be able to access that safety and privacy without understanding why or what's happening underneath. Our default should be secure, good choices. It should be clear to you what's happening. And that's complicated, right? Because you is a lot of different people with different levels of understanding or desires to understand. But we should try and make it clear to everyone based on what they want and need to know. And the way that our protocol and our apps work should nudge users towards behaving in ways that make them safer and more secure. So really we're looking for a peaceful, hassle-free experience of encrypted messaging. And the dependency in terms of this problem is if it's difficult to use Matrix, it's not going to be secure. People are going to make mistakes. So actually, it's a prerequisite. If we want to be secure, it needs to be easy to use and understand. Okay, so that's what we're going for. Now I'm going to tell you all the things we've made worse, and maybe even a little bit of why. So here's the big list. We're going to go through each of these things, so you don't have to like read. But yeah, we've actually been making encryption more visible. not deliberately, but because we need to do that in order to move to the next phase. So you might have seen more warnings popping up, and certainly in some of the Element apps. We've been pushing towards verifying devices, making your devices secure, which again it's a hassle. We're hassling users to do that. We've been talking about encryption, building a shared language to talk about it. We've been showing warnings if your encryption setup in your app is not complete. We've been letting you know if we're not quite sure of the identity of the sender of a message. We've been showing you warnings if the message came from a source that we're not absolutely clear is fully trusted or fully known. And we've been adding pop-ups to say someone has changed their identity. You may have seen this if you used an Element client. So lots of noise has happened. So let's go through these a bit more. So if a message is sent from a device that has not been verified, we have added warnings in the Element clients that let you know this and show you a red exclamation mark. And that the reason for that is because it's not actually known for sure in a cryptographic sense who sent that message. So we've had to make this more visible, and we have plans, which I'll talk about later, for making this less visible again, making it safer, which we'll get to. But our first step was to make sure we surfaced the knowledge about this so that we can get onto the job of people verifying their devices so that this doesn't happen. And speaking of which, we have been encouraging people to verify their devices. There's actually a mode you can run Element Web in where it forces you to verify your device after logging in. And in the Element X clients, that's the default behavior. We've also been nagging users, please verify your device. A change which is not really making things worse, but certainly making them more visible as we talk about things. We've been building a shared language, a way to talk about all of these encryption concepts. There's an MSC 4161. If you're interested in that, I'm doing another talk at 4 p.m. today, where we'll talk through like what that shared language is, and try and build not just a shared set of words, but a shared understanding, not only of how our encryption works, but of how we can talk about it in a consistent way. More things where we've made it worse. We've been setting up, like doing checks within the clients to check whether your encryption setup looks how it should. So the bottom left warning there essentially says, we checked and something doesn't look right, and we'd like you to try and take some steps to fix it. Steps available to you might be downloading identity information from recovery, or it might be effectively starting over again, recreating your identity information, which is what will cause other people to see a message saying your identity was reset. Also, those other things there just encourage you to do things which are often good practice. Have some recovery set up so that you can do that, rescue if you need, and store your message keys encrypted on the server so that you can have access to your message history later. More warnings that we've added. I'm gonna do my best to explain how this is different from the previous warning that I talked about. So in a situation where we are not clear about who sent the message, often to the receiving side, this looks the same as if a device wasn't verified, but the cause is different. So it could be that we don't have the device information about the device that sent the message, so we can't check that device information is correct, Or it could be that we have device information, but we don't have the identity information about the identity that signed that device. And again, we can't show you that message in all conscience and say, we know for sure this came from this person. So we're surfacing that to the user, which makes it noisier, but more safe, and hopefully will become less noisy over time. And one example of how we've already made a little bit of a step to make this particular situation less noisy. This MSC is now merged, 41, 47, and that involves providing with the message key information, the device information, so that we know that we know what we need to know to guarantee, as long as we know the user's identity, that the message really came from that person. So including that information with that message makes this part, sometimes that situation I was just describing, not happen at all. Other things that we've done. When you have fetched the message keys from what we used to call key backup, and I'm trying to get everyone to call key storage, at the moment we don't know for sure, again, the provenance of that message, that it really came from that person. So we've added this warning to say we're not 100% sure about this message, and again we have plans to make that warning go away by being 100% sure. Now I'm sure a number of people have seen this type of message popping up over the last few months, right? Slightly irritating. So again, this is us surfacing the information that we think you need, and some of this is kind of temporary and some of this lasts longer. But yeah, this is a situation where if someone's done a reset of their identity information, in principle, like it might not be them anymore, right? That's the way of thinking about it. Someone may have taken over their account in some way. So this is to make sure that you are aware that this is happening. And again, we have plans to make this less common and less visible, least of which, or most of which, is just to avoid the situation where people need to reset their identity by making sure that that recovery setup works well. Okay, so that was all the things that we've made worse so far. And now I will go through some of the things we're going to do to address some of those things and make life easier. Again, with the vision being that you'll get all the safety that you want without having to go through all of the pain of the all of these warnings and things that you have to read and figure out, do I click this or do I click that? So ways in which we're going to do that, we're going to start off with excluding insecure devices. So that means instead of telling you we're not sure about this device, devices which are not set up right or not verified just will be as if they don't exist. So you can imagine this is a difficult change for us to make, because suddenly some people will disappear. We need to give a bit of warning about it, but it's coming. Also, we are in the process of providing dehydrated devices, which is a terrible name that we're probably stuck with. But yeah, one of the situations where we can't say for sure where the message came from, and also a situation in which you won't be able to actually decrypt messages, is when you logged out all of your devices. So when your devices are all logged out, if someone sends you a message, there is no device to encrypt that message for. So the message is the sender won't actually encrypt for your device. So dehydrated devices are essentially a way of having an additional device that's sitting there in a safe way on the server, and then when you log back in, we can then get the keys that were sent to that device and provide them to you. We're also looking at making management of the recovery key better. We're also looking at making that key storage more secure so that you can trust the information that's stored there. We're looking at lots of different ways of sharing identity information between devices so that we don't end up with devices, your own devices, that have different ideas of your full identity information. We've been doing lots of fixing bugs, and there's lots more fixing bugs to go, of fixing situations where your identity information is incomplete or not working right. And we're also going to make some of the warnings about resetting identity easier to consume and more appropriate to the context. So let's start with excluding insecure devices. So several of the warnings that I showed you earlier were about not being clear about whether the person you're speaking to is really them, because the device is not verified. So in the future, you won't get the warnings. You just won't be able to read the message, which it sounds good so long as it never happens, right? And there'll be more about that later. As I said, we're looking at dehydrated devices. So yeah, basically all your devices can be logged out, and there's another kind of special device around, which means that you won't get the situation where you log in later. You can see that someone has sent a message, but you're unable to decrypt it because you weren't there to decrypt for at the time. So it'll be decrypted for this this special extra device. Encrypted, sorry. So we'll be looking at how to manage your recovery key. So maybe integrating with the operating system or some other safe ways of making sure that you don't have to write down on a piece of paper that long list of numbers and letters, but it's still safe for you. The recovery key is like a critically important piece of information because it gives someone else, if they get hold of it, it gives someone else access to your identity information, which means that they can effectively completely impersonate you. So we have to be super careful how we manage it. But if the way we manage it is everyone has to write it down and then they lose it, then we don't actually get the benefit of that safety because people don't have to reset their identity and you lose all of the knowledge you have about who they are. So we need some kind of compromise between being really clear that this is too important for us to cache locally in the app, but if it's not convenient for users to actually keep hold of it, then it doesn't serve its purpose. Also key storage, or what I'm calling key storage, you might hear talked about as key backup, is the ability for you to save the encryption keys for all the messages that you've received safely on the server in a way that the server can't read. We have this feature already, so you can. That's why when you log into a new device, you can read old messages that weren't sent to that device. But we don't at the moment have sufficient security around that to be absolutely sure that we know who sent that message. Someone else could have in some way faked it. So by adding full authentication around that storage system, we'll no longer be uncertain about those messages, and then we won't have to show you the warning saying we're uncertain about those messages, right? So this is the same story of as we get better, we get more features in there, then things get simpler and easier to use. Similarly, all the warnings about there's something wrong, we're not necessarily sure what, but something doesn't add up with your identity information. But sometimes that happens because something happened on one of your devices. For example, you turned off key storage and then turned it on again. Now you have a different key for encrypting your key storage. Sometimes other devices are not aware that this has happened. So then you end up with an inconsistency between the devices. Maybe one of your devices can no longer save its keys to the backup because the backup is not how it was looking because the key's different. So we're going to be looking at how to make sure that all of your devices have a consistent view of all of that identity information. It's tricky. It means they need to be able to pass that information between them in a way that they can trust. But when we get it right, all devices will be up to date with all the identity information that they need. Yeah, this has been ongoing, but there's plenty more to do. Basically, that a lot of the situations where the identity information is not right is because of bugs. Something has not worked the way it's supposed to work. You shouldn't end up in that situation. Normally, maybe something happened out of order or something like that, and you don't have all the keys that you need. Or perhaps your account's really old, and some of those keys didn't exist at that point, and we're not syncing them around. So, plus, I think partly because of the confusion about the concepts, sometimes the ways that we set up your identity or we fix your identity just in themselves don't quite actually fully make sense. All the different flows through the application don't necessarily work. So we have been doing a load of bug fixing, especially in the Element clients, especially in Element Web, to make sure that when we recover, you actually do end up recovered, or at the very least, we tell you that it didn't work, if it didn't work, things like that. So there's plenty of bug fixing left on that. But if you're trying to verify your devices, things like that, you should find that it's already better than it was, but there's more to come. And another thing that might be a relief if you've been suffering from these so-and-so reset their identity messages is that the plan that we have at the moment, and there's still potential for design changes incoming, is that when we consider it to be a less important update, then that information will appear in the timeline as opposed to being a pop-up that you have to dismiss. And it's not a great pattern to have a pop-up that's in your face, but then the only option is to say, okay. Maybe you don't feel okay about it, or maybe the option is to dismiss. Maybe you don't want to dismiss it. So in a situation where we're only offering you that option, it seems better to put that information into the timeline so that you can see that information which you need to know, which is that the identity information for someone has changed, but not have it quite so in your face. If you're worried and you really want to know about the identity of another person, then you won't be in exactly the same situation, because if you do user verification with someone so that you have a confirmed guaranteed understanding of their identity and that no one is listening in, no one is man-in-the-middling you, we're actually going to display that in a different way, right? So if you've illustrated or demonstrated that you care about the identity to that extent that you've done user verification, then you will still get an intrusive pop-up saying, actually, this thing that you confirmed has changed underneath you, and you should pay attention. And in fact, even you won't be able to send messages until you've acknowledged or dealt with that problem. All right, so that was what are we trying to achieve, how we've actually made everything worse, how I promise we'll definitely make it better in the future. And now I have to tell you the important announcement you've all been waiting for, which is that exclude insecure devices is coming. So this is the most disruptive change out of all of this stuff. It's the change where clients will effectively ignore interactions with devices that are not fully set up and verified. So here's a slide that I had a build on so that it wasn't quite so much text all in your face, and then I switched to a PDF format, so you just have to read it. So all of the details of this are in MSC 4153, which has recently passed FCP. So this MSC says that exactly what I said. You should effectively ignore interactions with devices that are not verified. So that means not displaying messages that are sent by an unverified device, and not encrypting for devices that are not verified. So that protects you from receiving messages that you think are from someone and are actually faked, and it prevents you from sending private information to a device that may not be guaranteed to be the person you think it is. And what this means is that if you are using any matrix client to talk to someone who's using an element client, once this change has gone in, and there's time before this happens, but once this change has gone in, your messages won't get through, and you won't receive messages unless you are working on a verified device. The element clients will be either forcing or encouraging you to verify your devices so that you don't end up in this situation. If you're on different clients, we've been talking to lots of client developers. Hopefully they should be aware that this is happening. This is something that's happening in the matrix community. It's not a thing that's being done unilaterally by Element. This MSC is now past FCP. It's been approved. So hopefully your client developer will be implementing the MSC, so doing this excluding of insecure devices, and also getting you to verify your devices so that you don't end up in the situation where you can't communicate with people who are complying with the MSC. In the Element clients, if you're on a dev build, you can try this out right now. So you can go into the lab flag settings and tick the box that says exclude insecure devices when sending receiving messages. I turned it on about a week ago. Nothing blew up, so seems to be working. So you'll be able to turn this on very soon in normal builds as well. So at the moment, at time of speaking, this is in the dev builds, but it should be in the labs area in the Element clients very soon. There are complications around this for things like bots and bridges. So in principle, should be pretty straightforward for bots. There are ways for bots to verify their devices using a recovery key or other ways. So bots should be able to send and receive encrypted messages with people after this change if those bots verify their devices. For bridges, we're still in conversation about the situation where one bridge is pretending to be, say, hundreds of users, and that doesn't want to have hundreds of devices to represent that situation. So before the deadline expires, we'll definitely have sorted that out, and it'll all be fine. Okay, so just a little bit more on why are we making this very disruptive change. Two really important reasons. One is to make us all safer, and the other is to make using encryption easier. Okay, so if you're running around with unverified devices, it's impossible to distinguish between a malicious server who has pretended that you logged in with your credentials and someone who's genuinely logged in and not verified their device. So if we do this device verification piece, we know that all the devices that we're encrypting for or receiving from are valid devices for that user and can be trusted. So it's a fundamental need that we need to make this change. It is disruptive, but it's necessary. And the other reason is that it makes our lives simpler, so that we no longer have to have incomprehensible warnings about. We no longer have to know what a verified device is, right? I can stop having the arguments in the MSC about what do we call a verified device, because it's just a device, right? So our lives will get a lot simpler. We just ignore stuff that's not fully set up. Okay, so just to repeat, if your device is unverified, you won't be able to talk to someone who's using Element after about April next year. And as I said, this is not Element pushing this on unilaterally. This is us working with the Matrix community to improve the safety of our communication. So all other clients that comply with this MFC will have the same behavior. So, excluding secure devices is coming. It really is. It's been, for me, it's been a very long time, but it is coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have a question?
Thanks, Andy, for the nice talk. As a client developer, I have some questions. Of course, I'm on board with excluding insecure devices. I think that's clear. For all of the other things that you talked about in your talk prior to this, is there like a best practices guide for other client developers, specifically regarding the language we use when describing what encryption terminology is happening, and how those are involved with the user, like presented to users in a consistent way across the ecosystem, right? For example, if I say like something is unverified or unsigned or unauthenticated, right? Those could all be slightly interpreted differently. So a lot of what you talked about prior to the exclusion of insecure devices topic it seemed like element specific UI or UX choices. So, to make sure that other clients are also delivering consistent messaging, is there something like a best practices guide for that?
Yeah, so in terms of the work that we've been doing, and a fair bit of that can be built on by clients that use the Matrix Rust SDK. So a lot of the background and the patterns have gone into the Rust SDK. We've also just done a lot of work on the Element web client, which is not going to be reusable by other clients. In terms of language to use, hopefully I'll see you at 4 o'clock today when I do the other talk, where I'm talking about my push to improve the way we talk about all this stuff. And this, as I said before, it's a lot more than just the words. It's trying to build a set of concepts that are reusable and transferable, which hopefully would address some of what you're saying. So that could form some part of it. It's not a best practice guide, and maybe something like that would be helpful, but it's some way towards it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I was asking for. So
I'll hopefully see it for. Okay.
About this extra virtual device that you were talking about. Will that be visible to the user in the list of sessions? And if it will be a device that will be encrypted does that also mean that there will be a private key on the server? And if so, what does it tell us about end-to-end encryption?
Yeah, so okay, several questions there. So first of all, this is one of those features. So this is the feature that we've been calling dehydrated devices. So this is one of those features that potentially changes the security posture of a system. So this should be something that's optional, not necessarily that every client or every user will want to have switched on. It does provide an extremely useful facility, but it also comes with potential security problems. So taking your questions, will it be visible as a session? In mass, it's not visible because it's a cryptographic device. It's not like a user login. So that's a concern. We want to make sure that the fact that this is happening is visible to the user, but we don't think it's particularly appropriate to list it as a login or a session in the list with the others, but we do think it needs to be visible because it's important, and that it will be surfaced with something along the lines of like receive messages when logged out or something like that. So yeah, that answers that. And so in terms of the keys that are stored, someone else want to help me out with exactly what's stored on the server? Maybe Rich?
Yeah, so the dehydrated device will have a private key, same as a regular device, but that key is then stored encrypted on the server, encrypted with your recovery key. So only a user with the recovery key can then get hold of those keys that it needs to fetch all the encrypted messages. You do still have 2 passwords. You still need a recovery key.
It sounds like I'm going to see you at 4 o'clock because we'll talk about the 2 passwords then.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, Andy, and thanks for the great talk. I'm curious, do you have any idea of what's the percentage of unverified devices out there?
Yeah.
What will be the impact of this change?
Yeah. We've been looking at this, and part of the decision-making process about exactly when to make the switch will be about the information we have about, how many users is this going to negatively impact. We have stats for Element clients, which on Element X look very good because it forces you to verify your devices. Surprisingly, it does not 100% because if you give up on your login halfway through, then we get a few devices that are unverified, but they're basically not being used. On Element Web, as we've improved the how annoying and difficult it is to verify that, and how more we've nagged users, that number is improving. I can't remember it. Can anyone remember any absolute numbers? I think it's somewhere like 70 to 80% of Element Web users who are verified. We're also trying to get information from matrix.org. We think we can get information from matrix.org if we work with the matrix.org administrators. But we tried to get that data the other day and it looked wrong to us. So we will be tracking this, but I don't have good numbers for you now. But that will be part of the decision-making process.
Right. Yeah, thank you. And a bit of a follow-up question is, besides bots and bridges, which you mentioned, are there any other legitimate reasons for a device not to be verified?
I don't think so. I think we should see it very much as part of the login process. So, yeah, I don't think so.
Thank you.
Actually, I think it's been answered now.
I think there was one towards the...
So there's a question online. So the question is, how can we find and verify cryptographic keys when they are not stored as obvious visible files? Normally we start by the key generations when a client is installed, but they are invisible. How to find and prove they are keys?
Can I read? Sorry.
Yes.
So, how can we find and verify cryptographic keys when they're not stored as obvious visible files? Normally we start by the keys generations when a client is installed, but they're invisible. How to find and prove they are keys? Right. So, I think this gets to something that I think is important, which is, again, maybe the talk at 4 o'clock will help a little bit with this, but what's going on is a bit hidden from the user at the moment, and obviously it's good not to try and educate the user on all the details of how this stuff actually works, but I think there are some missing concepts at the moment. So yeah, what happens when you log in, when you first create your account, is that this thing I've been calling identity gets created, which is a bunch of keys that's stored locally on your device, and that's not necessarily how most apps work that are not doing encryption. Normally you would create a login and most of what's happening is on the server, right? And it doesn't really matter what's on your local device, and that's really different in an end-to-end encryption situation. So yeah, right now you create your account, your identity gets created on your device, and we don't make that at all visible, and we also don't really make it clear what's happening when you verify your device. What's actually one of the things that's happening when you verify your device is that identity information is being copied to that other device, and now it's stored locally on that other device as well. And I agree with the sense of the question of why is this invisible, and how can we be sure the right things are happening if it is invisible? But I'm not sure I have an answer other than to say yes.
Okay. There's another question. Encrypted key backup and cross-signing are powerful, but still complex for average users. What's being done to make these features more intuitive?
Yeah. Okay. So the encrypted key backup, which I'm trying to call key storage, not key backup, because I don't think it's a backup. See me at 4 o'clock if you want to hear me rant about that. Storing keys on the server in a way that is safe is it's a complicated thing. It's incredibly useful because you can log into another device and read your messages. What part of what we're doing is making that more, like making the words that we use more understandable. Another part is providing just clearer UI and like flow in the apps for that. So you may notice it in recent versions of the Element clients. You either have key storage turned on, in which case you've got more options, or it's turned off and you just don't have any options. And that simplification for me, which is not technically necessary, just makes it, at least for me, a lot easier to understand what's going on. You have this kind of graduated process of, if you turn on key storage, then you get more options. So I think to really make progress with this, we need to have this shared set of concepts and language for understanding what's actually happening, or how to explain what's actually happening at the right level. But yeah, reducing the number of buttons is part of that process, right?
I wanted to ask, on which side does the exclusion of insecure devices happen? Is it client only, server only, or both sides?
This is all purely client. So everything end-to-end encryption is client. So
Okay.
So you were talking about the simplification for the recovery key, and recovery key is my identity. So you said you could write it to the OS, but I think that's not possible, because if you lose your device, your mobile phone, then your identity is also gone. So have you any other ideas? Because I'm also thinking about how to make this simpler, because I'm also a client developer. So do you have any other ideas how to make this process more streamlined for the user than just write it down or save it somewhere safe?
yeah, so in some cases, storing it in the operating system provided storage could potentially be a cross-device solution, right? So depending on what, like on Apple or on Android, there might be some store that is basically sufficiently not us that we trust that someone else is looking after it well, but it may be a cross-device thing. So that might be one way that we address it. I think it's a really difficult problem. Like it's sufficiently precious information that we kind of refuse to store it for you, and therefore it's hard to handle. And I'm not sure I have other ideas. I think that where we are right now is that we our ideal user would store it in a password manager of some kind. And if we can make that easier, that's good. There is also potential for other ways of kind of proving your identity using certificate schemes, which possibly might work in a corporate context and not in an individual one. But yeah, it is a really difficult problem, and that's the closest that I can see to a good solution.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm not a geek, not a tech guy. I'm a consumer and standard customer, let's say it like this. So I have some fundamental problems to understand the wordings we are speaking about here. Perhaps it is stupid for some people here because I'm not a geek, but we are speaking about verifying sessions, then devices, then we have backup keys, passwords, unsecure identity, and the verify session, for example. Somebody explained me, it is for me, perhaps I'm wrong, let's see, it is synchronization of the keys between devices. Why not saying I'm synchro my device, like Signal. I'm synchronization to devices. And the wording of identity with my backup password or recovery password as an end consumer, I'm saying, I have a login. That's my identity. Why we are using here now the wording unsecure identity when I have not put the password for recovery? So all this is for me and my customers. I have now 2.5, 3 years experience with this. And the main problem we had in our business is all this.
Yeah.
So, perhaps you can clarify me. When I'm understanding it, my customers will understand it too.
Yeah, so again, this is just an advert for my talk at 4 o'clock. It seems like. So, yeah, so. You're good.
Ask the same questions.
Same place in an hour later. Yeah, I totally agree. It's incredibly confusing. I think it's been inconsistent within individual clients, let alone across multiple different clients implemented by different people. We have lots of different words for the same things. We have words which are used in the spec, which is at a much more technical level than what most users would expect to deal with. We have, like, we're trying to change what words we use, so we've just introduced more words. So, yeah, the situation has been really difficult, and the purpose of the MSc and the work that I'll be talking about at 4 o'clock is to start the process of improving that. And I think the first step is to get some consensus on what the list of concepts that we should be communicating to users is, make it as small as possible, and what words we'll use to do that communication, the way we'll talk about it.
Last point. So technically, it is a synchronization of the keys.
Yeah, so when you verify devices, one of the things that happens is that you copy this identity information, which is a set of keys.
Identity information, I like it.
Yeah.
I have also a very dumb question. So, seeing from a customer, speaking of my father, for example, old person, he has a device that is working. But as often when he made his login, the encryption key, we don't know where he put it. He didn't write it down, he didn't save it at whatever.
Is this the recovery key?
A recovery key, yes. And now the question is, with all this evolution, will he continue to use his client and be able to verify new clients?
Right.
Or at some point, will he have to do a reset?
Yeah, so...
Which scares him.
Yeah, so... There's multiple different situations you can end up in. So if you have a fully working device, but you've lost your recovery key, you can recover from that situation by creating a new recovery with a new recovery key, and that will upload the good information that you have on your local device to recovery. So that is a way to get out of this.
When you try this, it says that it will erase everything that happened before.
So, there's a distinction between resetting your identity and resetting your recovery, which is not well explained or demonstrated at the moment in lots of places. It's a crucial difference because one is much more destructive than the other. So if and when we have a really good way of talking about all this stuff, it will get easier. But yeah, there is a way to recover. If not, sometimes you have to reset your identity. Once it's reset, you can then hopefully continue well from there. And it's that resetting your identity. It is another thing it's difficult to communicate about because, in principle, you might lose everything, but often you actually don't because it's stored locally on the client. So we have to warn about it. But sometimes it's not as bad as it sounds, but we don't want to guarantee anything. So, yeah, we can also make that better, right? So in some sense, that is a bug because we can get your local client into a really good state before you reset identity, and then the consequences are likely to be less severe. So we could improve that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question? Okay.
Yeah, it's more like a comment on the question before the last question. I think the root cause is all that confusion is that the end-to-end encryption in Matrix is like very, very powerful. It's more powerful than what you see in WhatsApp. And because of that, there are some things that the user has to learn. There's no way around it. The user has to learn some new things as they have learned to use technology like everywhere else. Now, I think the mistake that was made is that from the start, we, at least in Element, in some clients, we didn't make it easy for them to learn it. Because the UI was like partially driven by the implementation, trying to make the user understand how it works. I think we have learned from that. We're now trying to change it so that UI was more driven by what the user gets when they press a button, when they turn something on.
Yeah.
And hopefully that is one step forward, making it easier to learn. But obviously, it's still there is still some friction in there, and requires more work to get there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you come brand new to Element now, it's much better than it was, and it will be getting better and better. But I think it's critically important that across the Matrix ecosystem it gets better. Otherwise, we're not going to understand each other when we're using different clients. So we need to do more than just the improvements that have been made in Element.
Don't use the classic
Okay.
Don't use the classic mobile.
Right. So and Rich says don't use the classic. Don't use Element Classic if you can avoid it. Right. If you can use Element X, it's going to be clearer and more consistent.
Okay, so we're out of time. So let's thank Andy for this wonderful talk.
Thank you.